It looks like our participants have slowed down a little bit, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the Secret Weapon and Staffing Strategies and Soft Perks. My name is Sandy Dyer, and I'm from the DataMark team, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that we are recording this session. All attendees have been muted for quality assurance purposes. We do encourage questions through the use of the chat and the Q&A section of this platform. And myself and Stephanie, who's also supporting us from DataMark, will be monitoring that. We are going to hold questions till the end of the presentation, though. So it's not that we won't get to your questions, just wanted to let you know it will be more towards the end. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Mo Diekman, although most of you probably know her as Mo. Mo, I'm going to turn it over to you. Can you share a little bit about yourself, please?
Absolutely. My mother still calls me Maureen, by the way, Sandy, for sure. Yes. And I've been in the industry talking about technology since 1994. And about 10 years ago, even sooner than that, moved into talking about people and the humans that are using the technology for many reasons, if only to help some of these most stressed out individuals and folks coming into the industry to learn some of the technology changes, adapt to it, and then also how do they reel through the stressors of learning plus the stressors of their job. And so I'm a big fan of paying attention to Next Gen 911, but also the next gen of our staffing. I am the CEO and founder of Motivations. We just hit our 10-year anniversary as a female-owned business in the industry of government-funded areas and first responders. That's a big deal to get to 10 years. And so we kind of all had a little party, just celebrating being able to help so many people. So I'm going to go in today and talk about the humans that use all the technology. And I love conferences like this because the folks that are driving location identification and GIS data, and I used to speak thematic mapping and schematic mapping and probably didn't even say that right, so don't email me. I also used to talk a lot about the viewer of the map and what you can do with a viewer and all the different layers, whether they were on or off, and crime analytics in those pictures being able to tell a story. So I'm a big fan of that. And then what happened is somewhere along the way, I found a couple grumpy dispatchers, and some of you that know me well know that one of them actually hit me in a training class on technology. And I said, how do we help with some of that frustration over learning all of these things? And also, what do they do with all the information if we're increasing their first responder awareness of an incident, and we're increasing the things that happen to them in the awareness of what's going on in critical incidents, and then also causing them to learn more things? What does that do to the human? And I know some vendors occasionally joke a little bit about user errors, but there's a lot of substance and data behind how we're treating our people. And so when we look at the dynamic force of the industry right now, we have nearly every agency we come across hanging out "we're hiring" signs and posting on Facebook and LinkedIn and in the paper and job posting. And now we see RFPs coming out for temporary labor and services, and just trying to address keeping people working in such an important part of that first responder role and the first responder. And we'll even talk a little bit about reclassification. So if we look at some of the statistics first, I'm going to get to the secret weapon and soft perks, I promise. And at the end of this 45 minutes, I have a couple of very cool ideas that some agencies have deployed. And those of you that know me, I'm a bit of a disruptor in thinking outside the box. And that causes a very good debate or even an argument. And in that argument, we can sometimes work through why won't it work? And can we overcome those obstacles? And then why will it work? And that type of comparison, I feel, is very important in changing the way that we go forward in areas that will help us. So if we look at the humans coming in, the majority of us have very similar underlying factors. And as a matter of fact, most of them are interconnected, whether it's your relationships or some of you are doing this for your work, right? Your role in your PSAP, which is creating safe environment for the people that are calling you. But you also want that. Some agencies are in a lot of conflict and under fire when they're driving into where they're going to park and work, people throwing things at their car and what chaos and stress that causes. So safe environment is not only for our employees, but also the people that are calling into us. And then there's other things that come into a person coming into a workforce that already has a stressor in it: job promotion, healthy lifestyle, your reputation. And why is this important? Because we're going to talk a little bit about the age groups that are coming in and the age groups that are retiring. If you look at traditional age groups, which is my age, because I'm a little bit older, and okay, I'm a lot older, we have a little bit more weighted value in certain areas of our underlying factors and how we were raised: relationships, environment, leadership. And that doesn't mean that promotion and family unity aren't important. We just have a little weighted value. And in that traditional age group, we also have a little bit more sacrifice, self-sacrifice, working long hours, giving up coping skills, and working workaholic sometimes, and trying to get going and get the work done. And we don't always leave on time, or we create guilt around work-life balance or healing time, or what we would consider me time. And that guilt creates a little bit of an additional stressor, but it's wearisome. When you look at generations coming into the workforce, we have job promotion, healthy lifestyle, family unity with a different weighted value. That's not to say they don't want to be safe environments and not have strong relationships, as they put a little bit more prioritization around this. They also have parents that are trying to understand where they're going to be moving up in their career path and career development in this age group. I'm going to show you some statistics, has some pretty high percentages behind it. And it's not that we don't want career development. Some of that came naturally. Sometimes we're promoted by being in the agency the longest and knowing the most about our processes. It just is a weighted value where they're starting to pay attention to that a little sooner than 10, 15, 20 years into a career path. We live in a world of diverse cultures, different environmental upbringings. We have different personal experiences, and you're kind of merging that out onto the floor with very experienced senior veterans, sometimes burning out, and then younger, energetic, highly prone to technology, high performing, also with an awareness of healthy lifestyle being a priority of theirs. They come into this workforce. And how do we bring them together so that we're willing to learn from each other? So if we do note to self, the first one is be willing to learn from anyone. And I think if you can approach conversations and supervisors and new hires and trainers and people that you are interacting with in your first responder environment, if you're willing to learn, it changes the way that you hear and listen and react and respond. And then you start to understand the differences. There are quite a few differences in just this section of generational versus traditional. It's not even versus, it's just they're merging together. But we only have 45 minutes. And so for those of you that have seen me training before, I could go 8 hours on this particular topic. So we shall not, but always feel free to reach out. And we provide a lot of this information and teaching for free. And I'm happy to kind of dig a little bit deeper if you need to. I'm going to show you some statistics. And it's not to say there's anything negative or positive about it. These are just facts based on the entire industry of humans trying to figure out this staffing crisis. It's not just our industry, people quitting and coming in and working. There is a turnover. The turnover is real as our younger generation changes jobs and tries to find places to land that work for them and where they'll work for the place and where they have provided good value to the community of humans. And when you think about 42% changing their jobs at least every 1 to 3 years, there's also a large percentage that will have 9 to 12 separate career paths as they navigate their options and opportunities going forward. I'm going to spend a few minutes on what's important for this particular age group. And to ignore it would be a miss on our part because it is the same population size as the baby boomers, which was a dynamic force in the workforce many years ago. So to have that same population size be a dynamic shift in our industry should not be ignored. Then there's a small percentage of traditionals in between baby boomers and millennials. And that group of people is going to have a little burnout scenario as baby boomers exit. I'll get to a statistic about that in a minute. And millennials start to come in and churn in that staffing area. But let's just look at a couple things that are important. Learning and growing, very extremely important. 87 want professional development and career growth opportunities. And so to be in a training class and have new hires sitting there excited, ready to take notes, and then have existing staffing that's been there for a while, a little bit tired, saying somebody's got to drop dead before we get promoted. And the younger folks hearing that, and that being an overarching opinion in a particular center where there doesn't appear to be anywhere for them to move, that causes disconnect, frustration, misunderstandings, because I think career growth opportunities are very important to discuss, and they exist even if it's not a promotion to supervisor level. And if the supervisors aren't thriving in their position, you might not even want to be promoted to that anyways. So workplace quality, also very important. These are percentages that are very high on the grand scheme of things of your staffing. And for your technology experts and people that are implementing intercom centers, workplace quality and subject matter experts and professional development is something that every vendor can play in by creating champions of users of their software and interaction. And I even heard of a vendor that's doing chat out on the floor, which of course some agencies would not want to be that flexible and allow just anyone chatting with the vendor. But to have a knowledge base or interaction that causes people to be engaged changes the way that people think about their restrictions. And the reason that I mention that is we're going to talk about a few things that are outside the box. And one of the hardest parts, especially in police, fire, EMS, 911, communication centers, emergency operations centers, in that bucket of what type of agency you are, it's hard to have flexibility because we have processes, SOPs, and rules, and rightly so. I'm not discounting it. But how do we find flexibility in a seemingly inflexible environment? And if we can improve a little bit of flexibility in certain pockets, look at the percentage of 49% say it'll improve their happiness. Whoa, okay, that's half your people. And then you're like, well, I can pick a few that need to be happy. It's not always millennials, right? High performing and then also highly active in technology. It doesn't mean other people aren't high performing. It means that we're going to come at it with a different perspective. And engaging folks will help us with the engaged at work percentage and the actively disengaged. And I think we're going to come back to a couple of statistics here in a minute. And so, you know, we don't really want to beat the dead horse of what the problem is. And you guys can Google statistics all day long and come up with all kinds of numbers. And they're shocking sometimes. And in some, they're not really a surprise. And we just need to be careful labeling it. But I'm a big fan of what are we going to do about it? So where do we start? I think first you just need to put pen to paper and statistically speaking, I picked statistics today because it's a GIS conference and I love data analytics. 82% chance you'll do something about it if you just start writing down what some strategies are that are spinning around up here. And especially if you do a working group or a brainstorming session and you bring people around and say, let's think outside the box and let's not argue about whether there's a policy or permissions or the sheriff won't approve it. Let's just write everything that comes to mind. And that kind of brainstorming session is going to cause engagement and activity. And I'll tell you what other agencies here in a minute have done with some of that strategery. Workplace quality, we already mentioned in the statistics. I'm just recapping that slide. Flexibility, career growth, and career development. If we look at those 4 categories, and then we want to add to the dynamic that stress around those burning out is causing the existing environment to have a retirement and some of your most experienced people falling out, right? By 2030, baby boomers, remember I said the same population count as millennials will be 65 or older. And I just read in a very cool industry article written by Bonnie, Mission Critical Partners, and now I forget what magazine it was in, estimated 365 will be retiring every hour. And then if you calculate that, another statistic in a different article is 10,000 baby boomers leaving frequently. And so when you look at that exits, it's really important that we take care of the traditionals that are still working, and that age group that's just a bump above in age, the millennials, and that we start caring for the millennials and what's a prioritization. Then you look at overall surveys of the folks that are in comm centers, regardless of age, diversity, cultural upbringing, and look at what some of their demands are and their needs and things that make them just thrive at work. And recognition is at the top of the list in what's lacking in many areas. And you're starting to see a movement in some of those awarenesses by leadership. And that's an important note to make. That movement is going to make a difference. Recognition makes a difference. Reclassification challenges, funding for the hourly rate in some agencies are paying $12, $14 an hour. And they're excited when they get to 16. And that's a problem when businesses right down the street with a better reputation for being stressful or not, people can go work there for less stress, more money. And that dynamic is a painful lesson in how our existing thrivability is being managed out on the floor. Situational stress is going to increase, and it bumps up just under PTSD in just their daily activity and the stress that people are taking. So we talked about workplace quality, flexibility, career growth, baby boomers exiting, traditionals really working quite hard and doing some self-sacrifice. That reputation of your agency in a small town, people know whether to work there or not work there, and they know the reputation. For 20 years, it's been this. So changing the PR around that and changing the reputation of your agency where the population pool of candidates doesn't offer you very many applicants, you have a more awareness and a deeper responsibility to upgrade and refresh the reputation of your agency if you're in a rural spot. Work from home opportunities increase in other businesses, and they actually don't increase in our industry in certain areas of the United States, and in some areas they do. So you can see work from home opportunities at another agency and say, well, I'd like to move there, and poof, they transplant. So you can see opportunities increasing that answer that workplace quality and that flexibility. The other thing is young folks sometimes think they can be more productive, and whether that's true or not, or open for debate or not, it's the perception that they come at with that work from home mentality. So it should not be discounted. As much as you want to argue about it, it's still a perception that has to be managed. So if we take this recognition, reclassification, stress, reputation, work from home, and we put that into a bucket, what are agencies doing about it? Well, there's no short-term win. It's a government area, state and local government rules preside. Sometimes it's owned by the city or or disparate HR groups. So we need to take the strategies. I'm just going to back up a second and say, here's what we're trying to solve, because this is going to create some momentum with your staffing. We need to organize some of these things that come to mind. Imagine you're sitting around in a working group. We just brainstormed on a whiteboard or on sticky notes, and then we went and put it under short term or long term. And we really want to create a rule around this that says no idea is a stupid idea. We need to write down what comes to mind that we think is going to solve some of these: recognition, workplace flexibility, workplace quality, health and wellness, managing stress. You'd be amazed at what pops up that's available to you. So when we organize that, if everyone has sticky notes and you're putting it under short term and long term, you're noting immediate and possible soft perks. Then you start to squabble, how much money does that cost? Let's just first get it all out there. And then we start thinking about sponsorship, community involvement, funding, grants. I'm going to get to that in a minute too. And then you organize the other batch into the seemingly impossible, into that long-term, understanding that there is not an overnight fix to this staffing dynamic or crisis. And by the way, I mentioned at the end, I'm going to have a little bit of an idea that's going to cause for debate, or why won't it work? And I put my contact information there so we can argue about it or agree that it would work, which is even better. Some immediate and possible. I have been surveying agencies for a while, and I can tell you that immediate and possible that makes a human difference for new hires is care for the existing team. And the new hires coming into that existing team, how do they feel? How are they taking care of themselves? This has a direct impact on retention. A new hire should not get onto an elevator and have someone look over at them and say, welcome to hell. It does impact how they feel about the work environment they just walked into and are being trained on. So that care for that existing team directly impacts retention of your new people coming in. And so we need to pay attention to that. Onboarding new hires, caring for the existing team, those things go hand in hand. And we need to think about establishing career development. What kind of career development can somebody have at their position and their role? Certifications exist here. Training exists here. Certain subject matter expertise areas exist here. We're rolling out wellness champion training so that you can pick someone to be a wellness champion in your agency. They don't even have to be a supervisor, just picking career development and learning and growing. Learning and growing can be the lifeline to people pulling themselves out of some of their stressors on a daily activity. We have a couple training partners that are very interactive about proactive stress management, learning more about that so that when your train derails, you're bouncing back a little bit sooner with a little bit more resiliency and a little bit more restoration, and you're learning and growing, which gives you the confidence and industry awareness that sometimes people need to get past it just being a job. The other thing that agencies are doing under arguments, sometimes in duress or kicking and screaming, because there is an element of this is the way we've always done it. Flipping the script and the onboarding experience, and I'm going to go into a little bit more onboarding if we have time. But the language of encouragement, inspiration, involvement is not typically how we start onboarding. Sometimes we are training them on so many systems, keyboards, monitors. It can be very intimidating. And sometimes we intimidate in order to see how they will handle stressful environments. It isn't often that we spend time on health and wellness. Some agencies give them a PowerPoint and then never repeat it. And so they come out on the floor and people are ignoring the health and wellness the new hire just got in their onboarding. People are ignoring it out on the floor as if it's not part of their overall and daily activity that's needed. So flipping the script and sharing onboarding time on all the areas, career development, health and wellness, and the 911 system, and the CAD system, moving at your position, and the radio system, and putting some of those pieces together in the onboarding, but then repeating it and refreshing it for the existing staffing that's there, continuing to develop and continuing to grow. There are many resources growing now more than ever before, and so many of them are free. And every time I hear about a resource, I find it and I figure out, how did you get that? We have another webinar coming up where we're sharing grant resources on CISM training, which is critical incident stress management, and how you can go to training under a grant. And the grant is covering airfare and hotel and CISM training in order for you to take that back to your comm center and help your comm center. And how did that person find the grant, and where did they send their people to training, and how come we don't know more about that? And so traveling down those rabbit holes will help you put pieces of this together, but not if it's on your not on your list to handle stress management and critical incidents and get proactive in that piece, which feeds into your retention. There's also a collection of soft perks, utilization of citywide employee recognition programs, which exist in many cities, and wellness programs that exist in many cities. I just did a project recently, and we interviewed so many agencies, probably 40. And one of the things that we heard often was, well, there is a program for the city, but it's not for 911. We work for the city. Well, it's not customized for 911. But couldn't we go and engage that recognition program and get it through your supervisors and management and get it feeling a little like 911? Because I think a massage for the city clerk's office or a massage for a 911 dispatcher is still a massage, and it still feels good. Does the massage person talk differently to a 911 dispatcher? Well, then let's give them some coaching on the person that's going to be on their table, so they speak to the stresses and they understand the role and the job the person is suffering under, right? So it is not something we should stiff arm because it's not customized. Wellness programs, well, that's for the sheriff's office and the sheriff's deputies, but not for our operators. Well, could we take pieces of that? And I've seen dogs come into the comm center. They're over in one area of the United States, Kansas and Missouri. There's big horse program and for stress management. And now I forget the name of it. She's going to slap me that I forgot the name of it. There's wellness programs and available resources if we're being proactive, and we go figure some of that out. And some of these are not costing the agency. If you go through a critical incident, a friend of mine just went through a critical incident and found resources that were available, and called some of the contacts and said, thank you for caring for our officers. What about our dispatchers that were part of the phone calls and the radio, and heard some of that and invited them to participate with the dispatchers, and the resources were expanded to no cost of the center. And so that took someone being aware that it was necessary and doing the outreach. That's where we want to use some of that utilization. Budgeting and finance cheat sheets. I know this seems kind of funny, but there is a certain section of our population, especially when they're not getting paid enough to do their amazing work, they need a little bit of help with budgeting and finance. It's one of the top 3 stressors of humans living, is trying to pay their bills. And couldn't we create a little bit of activity that helps them with some cheat sheets? I mean, we just built out a cheat sheet on food that you can eat at your comm center position and the grocery list that goes with it. So rewards, recognition, kudos. I'm going to get to a couple of other things that are long-term, but let's just hit a few more soft perks. Whenever I read an article, I pull it out and I say, here's what we could be sharing with other agencies. And there's Nina and APCO having their wellness. Nina has a continuum with resources on there, and APCO has a whole community working group related to health and wellness. So there's coordinated activities that you can see, 5Ks by some nonprofit organizations, and activities that people do, like fitness bingo at their comm center and be kind bingo, and the dog therapy and horse therapy and monkeys. And okay, I'm just kidding about monkeys, just making sure you're paying attention. You should not let monkeys loose in your comm center. I've met a couple and they're squirrely. So there's a lot here that people implement on a regular activity out on the floor. I want to just spend a little bit of time on long-term work and precedents that are being set. There's an agency down in Arizona that took over the hiring process to bring it down from 6 weeks to 2. And it was owned by a different part of the city, and it took them a long time to get the permission. This is why it's long-term work. And they worked through the perils of making someone wait 6 weeks to get onboarded and the background checks, and they took over that workload. They got proper permissions to streamline that. And they changed who was running it and how long it takes, so that their candidates of high quality didn't go find other work within that 6-week time period, bringing it down to 2 weeks. And then other folks say that'll never happen. And maybe it'll never happen if we never start the work, but we want to think about how we can start the process and overcoming the obstacles and having those long meetings and conversations. You're establishing trust that the process will be run well if you're changing who runs it. And that takes time, and it doesn't happen overnight. There's also training by several organizations on reclassification, and there are states that are setting precedents on hourly rates and job classifications, and there's help for this. There's several nonprofits that are providing reclassification toolkits. I'm saying several, but there's not that many. There's a handful, and there are resources available for you to go find some of what have other people been doing and how did they do it and how long did it take. If you look up in Washington State, signing bonuses being approved. If you look on LinkedIn, there's a fellow moving from one state, picking the area of Florida that he would like to live and saying, who can hire me down here? And do we do lateral transfers? Finding agencies that approve lateral transfers and signing bonuses. By the way, those of you that have been in the industry for a long time, signing bonuses was not even a consideration in our space unless you were an executive going to work at an event from one vendor to another. It just didn't occur. So these are precedent setting times, and these are activities that people are publicizing that they got approval for. And so when you look at that reclassification and the hourly rates, taking some of the budgets and putting it towards that retention activity, and then how much is it going to cost and what can you accomplish, and then going through some of those approvals. There is definitely an onboarding process activity that is also long-term. I know we talked about encouragement and health and wellness, but if we were to address some of the most significant career development areas, exit interviews often help, but they don't often come with what do we do about it on the front end, unless you have that feedback loop helping that training organization. So when you hear somebody leaving that says it's just not worth it, this kind of stress, this kind of pressure, it's sad to hear that sometimes they don't know that they're actually doing a good job and that this stress and pressure is normal daily activity. And here's ways that you can deal with it to be able to thrive in this environment a little bit longer. We think about the hiring, onboarding, and training, do we welcome and inspire them to grow and learn and challenge themselves to figure some of these things out? And I can tell you some agencies are welcoming and inspiring and seeing some of the benefits. So training on call taking, tactical dispatch, and the employee environment used to be primarily SOPs, like over 70% of it, and then a piece on call taking, but really everything was on dispatching and SOPs and process and how all the CAD works and all the codes. And then there's a little bit on employee manual processes, calling time off. It wasn't a weighted value all these years before for the employee or the human. And so if you take that into account and understand 48% of the new hire stress today is juggling their shift life and their personal life, then we want to think about time management. They're interested in career development responsibilities. We already talked about those types of priorities. And then they desire an awareness and a recognition for the role that they play in the community. And they desire, especially in that younger generation and traditionals, they desire to help people and participate in their community. So if you take that into consideration, then welcome and inspire would shift the timing that we're doing in onboarding and training. And your employee and the human becomes a larger percentage of where you're spending your time, and you're showing them how to care for themselves and how to have restoration and what happens and where do they go to get help and how do they ask for help, and is it confidential when they ask for help, and what resources are available if they have a critical incident that they related to, or what resources are available if the whole agency goes through something. And if you look at vendors participating in this space, all y'all technical people, there are some CAD systems that are putting triggers into their CAD. This dispatcher went through a critical incident and it triggers the agency to check in on the person, not only go through all the processes and dispatch the right resources and apparatus, but have a check-in so that the supervisor or a caring person or a wellness champion or a peer support specialist checks in with that person in a proper process. It becomes part of their CAD workflow. And how amazing is that? That people are starting to figure this out. And so that way someone is aware that person went through something, even if they weren't on the same shift at the same time. And so it just changes the percentage in where you're spending time with the humans. It doesn't discount technology and SOPs and dispatching, just creates a weighted value that starts to serve the humans. Career conversations, for those of you that haven't had them, I can tell you people struggle to interview for promotions if they've never had anyone help them out with that before. And this is sometimes a disservice because they do have a desire, but some of your folks have landed there and worked for many years. And the last time they interviewed was when they landed. And how do you interview for a promotion? If someone's interviewing from the outside coming in and they were already looking for work, they're going to be a little bit versed in Googling and figuring some of that out and helping those. Sometimes people think it's common sense, but it's actually something that they don't even occur to them to Google how to interview for a promotion when you're coming up from within. So giving them career conversations why are you here? Where are you now? Why do you want to go? And it doesn't have to be, a slog of a meeting, by the way. Using career terminology, learning and growing in the role helps them build confidence, helps them see the future and build themselves a roadmap and a step to something, and it helps them set some goals. They're not always about promotions. Development doesn't necessarily mean you have to change your roles right away or even ever. Short-term goals drive the folks, whether it's an individual or a team, to some of that long-term planning. Then we're starting to develop teamwork instead of tearing each other down. And we're developing everybody pulling in the same direction. This is a really long section. There's my little timer. Just going to spend a couple minutes here on something that really should take several hours or an hour in a working group that you do with ideas. I'm giving you some ideas that we throw up in class just because people are giving them to us all the time. The same role, learning and participating in NINA, APCO, EMP, RPL, CTO classes, workplace quality, champions of healthy lifestyle, paying off debt, improving relationships, especially if you have techie people that think about the PSAPs of the future. What does that look like? And people that are interested in relationships and they live with or have family that aren't in the industry, how do they have those conversations with that family? Those are important pieces of your career conversations. There are some cheat sheets available on career conversations. They don't always have to be with the boss. Sometimes there's several snippets and not long lectures. Sometimes they're impromptu and a lighter touch instead of a performance evaluation. Starting this type of conversation, you start to hear what people's interests are and how to engage them and how they can engage others, especially if you put a few people in charge of something like a recognition program or food in the fridge. So there's cheat sheets here. I just popped up a couple excerpts from the leadership cheat sheets that we have in some of our online classes and our workshops. And there's things in here. We're happy to provide them if you reach out to us. We don't charge for that. And you think about that long-term strategy, but some of those short-term engagement pieces. And sometimes you're frustrated because we tried this and we tried that and we tried this. We still have people quitting. It sometimes is finding the recipe, right, for your agency, your people, and your community. And sometimes it's improving the reputation of your agency too. So I told you I'd spend a couple of minutes on the secret weapon. We have decided to roll out shift coverage. And let me tell you, how many people wanted us to do that during COVID, and we weren't quite ready for it. Also, we were also getting through COVID ourselves, which did some damage on my own staffing. Dispatchers on demand, regionally rotating dispatchers around and helping cover shifts, and they work for us and they come out and help cover your shifts. And we follow a precedent that was set a long time ago by TERT. And what's the toughest part? And the toughest part would be what? And you can drop it in the chat. I can tell you, some people think, oh, this is an excellent idea. There's a few naysayers. This will never work. Well, we have folks trying it out. And the toughest part will be different with every agency. It's like 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins. One of them is going to be Rocky Road. And then you're like, oh, can change management really exist when it comes to staffing? I'm looking at the chat. No one's answering the question on the toughest thing about shift coverage. If I flew somebody in and covered your shift, you would have something to say about it. What do you think that is? Aha, Heather, that is true. Different CAD systems, the culture, and the coworkers. So they're going to come in and someone's going to think it's glamorous to travel. And that it's easy and fun to be eating out at different airports all the time. It's not true. It's not glamorous. And then the different CAD systems. Oh, Hugo, this is good. Local protocols. You know, SOPs here, are they the same SOPs here? The truth of the matter is that if you flew somebody in to handle hurricane or flood or tornado damage, that you can actually do several hours of orientation and get the gist of SOPs, because the industry has been rolling out standards for years. So there'll be a couple nuances of dispatching here and that know the region. And so is it insurmountable that we can't overcome some of those? Because on the flip side, someone's going to tell you, I've been dispatching for 25 years. I will figure out the CAD in no short order. And so argue that point, right? And then is it worth it to give your team some time off and have someone come in and cover something that you can trust them to cover, having an orientation on your CAD and your SOPs and understanding the gist of it. And then you put them in a position, sometimes it's call taking and someone else takes over all the other stuff. And sometimes it's in an area that you feel you can trust them to cover, to provide respite and relief for people that need time off, or because you have an area of the United States that has the National Guard helping them cover shifts, their staffing is so short. And you have other agencies closing their doors because they can't run 24/7. And so is it worth it to overcome that CAD training or the SOPs? Rhonda, difference in pay. Yes, travel workers generally are paid way more than regular workers. So that would cause some resentment. Traveling workers Also don't get to go home to their family while they're traveling. And so they take a beating, and then they're sitting next to people that are like, you're getting paid way more than me. And then they're like, I'm away from my family helping you. And so you got to have some good people that can handle that kind of coworker environment, because what if it works? And by the way, there's other industries doing it, and you start to figure out some of the nuances. Where do these people come from? Every PSAP in my state is short-staffed. Hugo, that's a really good question. What if they came from us and we're hiring them from all over the place? And then we hire them and they travel around your state. So we just have to find the problem and then find a solution, and then we have to try it out. So several of you nailed it, because Centers with Union would probably never entertain that idea. Yeah, unions do not like you taking over their workload. And I think that I have not tested this theory in a union environment, although I know 3 that we are working with on surveying why wouldn't it work. And we're bidding some work to share the work with the union because they are short-staffed. So if we can find precedent to set there, I imagine that we'll start to figure some of that out. So coming into the existing environment and onboarding requirements in CAD, Heather and Hugo, and then funding for the coverage. So you guys really in the chat room understood the noise that's around this. And I can tell you that there's enough energy behind it that we can solve it. And of course, we're not going to get world peace. Obviously, there's going to be some states that don't let people come from out of state, and there'll be nuances around the SOPs. So I think good that there's precedent set, and then we start chipping away at where can we make it work to provide respite, so that it's not every single agency that's suffering. I think too, the more people say why it won't work, the more you have people, not necessarily positive Pollyanna, but people that start to think about, well, what if they just covered the 7-digit emergencies and the people walking up to the counter? What if they covered that position so that that person could have time off because she's worked 21 days straight without a day off? What if we did intermittent relief areas and built trust and sent people that were positive and understood the issues related with CAD and pay? Experienced people want to help. And so I think you'd be surprised by the number of dispatchers in the area that actually want to help and think it would be kind of fun to go in and help some of the folks that are short-staffed, to give them time off. And even if only to get out of their own shift life and their own agency burning out, right? To try and revive their own energies in the industry. Everyone has their own types of motivators and career development ideas up here. And if you can feed some of them regionally, sharing isn't impossible. But the union piece, that might be a little sticky wicket, Hugo. Right. Okay, so I should pause, because I always say I will pause and take questions. Sandy, what time is it? My little beeper went off.
So first of all, I did want to share that Tina had shared, this went back to sign-on bonuses discussion that you had. And what she had shared was that sign-on bonuses are great, but offer a higher stay-on bonus to your current employees. Have them sign the contract just like new hires. That ensures your trained and valued employees stay and help to train the new hires without this grudge about, why do you get a sign-on but I'm not getting one? And I thought that was a really great idea and wanted to share that in case folks weren't looking at the chat. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to,
sorry,
go ahead.
The other thing about existing employees, sorry to interrupt, stay interviews have been very valuable. So if you do a sign-on bonus and a please stay bonus, and then an interview the people that are there, a stay interview. And there's a word for it, and it escapes me. But interviewing new hires and the people that are there and taking that information and using it, it's very enlightening.
The other, it can be. I know that for someone like me who, I mean, honestly, over the last 30 years, I've worked for three 3 companies or agencies, because I came from government prior to Datamark. Interviewing was not something I did a lot. And so when it was time to interview, it was a struggle. And for those, again, who may not be looking at the chat, I did post the link to both Nina's Wellness Continuum and APCO's Health and Wellness website. So if you didn't get that and you'd like me to repost, please let me know. From a question point of view, you did mention that there were some free resources out there. Where can those free resources be found was one of the questions that I received.
Okay, so resources for eating, sleeping strategies, engagement, Wellness Continuum is constantly posting resources, articles, activities, webinars. The Continuum part of NINA, you do not need to be a member of NINA to go to that section. Also, I'm going to be on a webinar on March 30th. That's Circle of Life. And there's a resource I just got in my email today in Tennessee, a grant that you can go get CISM training for free. And they cover your travel to send people. I finally got the link today from the lady that sent her people and told us about it. And so really it's a collection of people participating and finding them and then posting those resources. Also, Leanne Magoski down in California just went through a critical incident and did some outreach phone calls to the people helping her agency go through that critical incident. And she found resources that were available to her agency, puppy therapy, dog therapy. I might have gotten that wrong. I just know dogs were involved. And so were some other things that the city provided to them because of the incident. And it was not a hit to her budget. And so, but she did a little bit of looking into it and some outreach and some phone calls. Can you involve our dispatchers? Of course we can. And it's making those people that are engaged with your first responders out in the field aware that you exist and that you have needs. And that's part of the communication workflow, is make them aware you exist and that you have needs. Yep.
Well, and Hugo shared that as opposed to a sign-on bonus, we instituted a stay bonus paid over 3 payments, December, March, and June, which could really help someone out, right?
I'm totally writing that down, Hugo.
I'm telling you, that's a great idea. And then I apologize that I can't say the last name, but they just moved into the CAD world, but in their previous position had monthly one-on-ones with supervisors. And then that way feedback went both ways, right? That opportunity to share. And I know that I actually meet with my manager every week just to kind of touch base and what's going on and what are my gripes. Because anybody who knows Sandy knows she has a gripe.
Well, I like to structure one-on-ones to be a little what's working, what's not working, what do you need, and what's the pulse of your team. And if you hit those 4 categories, it should not be a bitch session, and it should not be, an attack. It should be organized with activities. What can we do about this? And also, if it's silly or ridiculous, then it's not a legitimate need, and so but it should be discussed and figured out. And no, you can't work from home, but here's some things you can do from home, certifications and things like that. So if you focus on it being structured and positive, and there's Becky's in our chat group here, several years ago, she started working on structured one-on-ones and action registers that start to give them something to work on, but a responsibility to their own participation in their health and wellness and career growth. So it's not the boss never handed me a perfect job. It's a participation thing, and it causes that engagement. If one-on-ones become where you're in trouble and a 1-hour slog, people start skipping them. Yeah.
And there are, I know that when I work for the state, there are templates out there to help structure your one-on-ones to where it touches on all those things in case you're struggling on that.
I have the Mo template, which has a whole lot of motivation and kudos in it. Like, come on, say thank you for showing up.
Someone else did ask if we are sharing the session recordings. We are. At the close of the conference, the session recordings do get shared out. So if you did miss any part of Mo's session, or that you wanted to share that with the other, obviously share the messaging in your agency, that will be available to you after the session or after the conference closes. I also wanted to share, I wanted to give you a few minutes we have about 3 minutes until the next session. Mo, I truly appreciate you sharing your time and expertise today. For those that may have had a question and we weren't able to respond, please feel free to reach out to Mo directly. Our next session is 83 Days, the Hernando de Soto Bridge Story at 11 Pacific. This session will cover the story of the Hernando de Soto Bridge, the discovery of its structural damage, and the actions taken to ensure the safety of the public. So please attend that one next. And then Mo has another presentation tomorrow. I believe it's at 10 Pacific. It's the 311 on 988 and 911. So make sure you check that one out also. Thank you, ma'am. I always appreciate you.
You bet. Thank you, Sandy. You guys go off and have a good rest of your day.
Yes, I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you.